Well, welcome, Jason. We want to thank you so much for joining us for this exclusive Pro Football Hall of Fame interview. First and foremost, congratulations to you and your family on your new position as the new team president for the Washington football team. Jason, I can only imagine the outpour of texts, phone calls that you received during this time. But if you could take time back to just share with us one or two people that you were so surprised to hear from.
That's a good one. I heard from so many former teammates, over the course of years that reached out. But a few of them that jumped out to me, I got a note from, one of my elementary school teachers, that like I hadn't talked to, I don't know, in 30 plus years. And, she just said, I saw something in you when you were young man, just like that sort of like old school encouragement of like, I knew you was going to make it. that was just incredibly encouraging. I got a really great call from, the commissioner who just said like, hey, ever since we first interacted with each other deeply a few years back, like, I know you're ready for this. And it was just, a great vote of confidence. And then so many former coaches and folks that reached out as well. In particular, the guy who was the GM at the Cardinals when I was there, Rod Graves, who was really just a trailblazer for Black talent in the front office. And, so many others that I could mention, but it's been good. I still got to catch up on text. So sorry, y'all, I haven't texted back yet. It's been a week.
Well, you're heading into week 2, so just taking a look back at week 1. I know you had your hands full. How was your first week in the team facility?
I mean, it was both tumultuous and beautiful at the same time. We are starting a big culture change within the organization. And frankly, last week and the pressure it put on our organization, the emotional week it was for us all, it actually got us accelerated in that culture change. Our workforce got a view of how we're going to lead differently, the way we're going to be transparent, the language we're going to use in communicating with folks. And so, they got to see if we really bout it. And hopefully they got the message that we are.
Well, if you don't mind sharing, what are the process and procedures that you're putting in place for the verifications or denial of the second round of allegations made by the female employees as reporting in the Washington Post?
Yeah, I'll go into all that. So, the first is I want to clear up that the independent investigation that's already ongoing is for real independent. I think that got muddied in the communication of it a little bit. No, these folks were recommended by the NFL. They operate autonomously from us. We just paying the bill because we should nobody else have to pay for it, right? So no one else should have to pay for it. So we are paying for it. But that is it. It is really, and that is a key component here, to get an unfiltered, raw view of what it looks like on the inside. That's a key component. But above and beyond that, we're actually going to put into place, what should have been there all along. And that is a clear pathway for people to put complaints forward, see them escalated if they're above a certain threshold, preserve anonymity throughout, have the right facilitated conversations, and then actually have actions that we take on behalf of and defending our employees, particularly women, when they face any kind of hostile work environment within the club. We're putting that into place. We've actually brought in external help to get started more quickly because we're under-resourced on the HR side. And then I'm building that organization. We're in the process of building a robust and proper HR organization. And I started that actually before I officially started. I saw it from the outside in as I was getting ramped up and onboarded and said, we're going to have to accelerate this. And then, the other thing is, when I say I'm trying to show a culture change, like I'm just trying to talk to folks. And this is something that, doesn't often get done in organizations. It's Coach Revere's approach too, and he sets a similar tone, but I'm going to talk to everybody in our organization by the end of the year. And I'm going to get direct feedback from the front line. So I know exactly from the mouths of those who live it, what our culture is like. And that's going to give us more insight and wisdom than anything else.
Wow. In your new role as a team president, what commitments and parameters did you get from Majority Owner Dan Snyder?
He's like, run the business, run it. It's pretty simple. Coach Revere is the chief executive of all things football. I'm the chief executive of all things business. There's no muddiness. And so far in the week that I've been in, I've taken some bigger, bolder things across, and, I'm in pretty good touch with Dan and Tanya. We stay pretty collaborative. And every single time I've had a big idea, they said, "Oh yeah, do it. It's yours. Oh yeah, do it. It's yours." It has been carte blanche. And so I expect that to stay the case. So I'm rolling.
And what are those ideas, Jason, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, I mean, some of them I'll hold back because they're fairly confidential, and I want them to come out at the right time. But there are some things that I found out about different parts of our workforce, and whether or not we've had consistent policies for every part of our workforce. And you'd say, oh, it's a big deal to try to change some of those things. Well, it wasn't to Dan and Tanya, and it wasn't to me. And so, we changed some things to have consistent workforce policies, consistent ways of evaluating and assessing commissions and bonuses and things like that needed to happen. And so we just did it. We just did it and didn't think twice about it. There will be more and bigger things coming down the pipe like that.
Wow. You played for 4 organizations, Jason. What did you learn from each team, good or bad?
Oh yeah. How long we got, Jameer? I'll say, my brief stint in San Francisco, I was cutting a couple weeks into training camp or whatever it was. There, what I really learned was that this game is fickle. And as a player, it is touch and go. And I think for me, that informed my thinking and how I'm an executive and a leader of one of these organizations, where I don't oversee the player side or anything like that. But insofar as I can make any organization feel stable in what feels like a touch and go industry at times, where people are here today and gone tomorrow in some respects, I don't want that to be the case. I want to establish a legacy business, something where people see themselves growing over time. And, my abrupt in and out of an organization helped frame that for me. My time in Atlanta, I was on and off the practice squad. I was running out of money. I was living with my aunt and uncle on the east side of east side of Atlanta, driving an hour and a half to the stadium. It was hard, but it also embedded me in the community. And so in Atlanta, I realized that the team is really part of a broader community. And at the time, we were rocking and rolling. Then we went to the NFC Championship. Atlanta was moving with the team, and so I see my role as ensuring that our team both represents in a proper way and is properly connected with the broader community. We need to represent the DMV. We need to be focused on the goals of economic development around the DMV. We need to be in the community. In Cleveland, I learned about a passionate fan base. I learned about what it means to have, devoted, invested fans. And I also learned what it was to see lots of experiences, lots of change in an organization, and to see how you need stable pillars and stable values to be able to navigate change well. And in Cleveland, sometimes we did it well, sometimes we didn't do it well. So I learned a couple things there. And then in Arizona, I really learned about what it means to lead. I was a team captain there, and the coaches there gave me real autonomy to help shape our team, shape our game plan. I worked so much, even more closely than I worked with you on the business side of folks there, to really understand how to shape the organization in the direction we wanted. And so being empowered to lead in this environment is what I gathered there. Altogether, it makes me feel excited about being back.
Wow, that's amazing. Jason, when you see our country going through so much surrounding racism and social justice, did you ever see or experience racism when you were playing during your career?
Oh, that's a good question. No one's asked me that. I actually need to think about it. Well, I'd say, my usual answer is I talk about, our history being one that, whether we like it or not, is steeped in a narrative of economic and physical violence towards Black folks. This is a great country. I love this country, but that doesn't mean that that's not part of the historical narrative that exists. It's there, plain and simple. And that's the narrative of my family as well. Whether it's my grandfather on my dad's side who started the NAACP chapters in the 1940s in East Texas, but then got blackballed as a teacher because he did that. It was considered a terrorist organization at the time. And so he couldn't get a job as a teacher, got pushed out and was forced to farming. And then a racially motivated militia tried to take the farm by force. So these histories are very, tied in my family. It can go forward to my dad being arrested as a peaceful protester, and all of us have these experiences in our families. In the league, I did experience this a couple times. One that was really acute, and I'll leave the name of the city out because I don't want to make nobody mad. But I was traveling. I was with the Browns, and me and a bunch of teammates went to a restaurant in this city, and they only served the white teammates at the table, and actually didn't even really want to serve at all, but at least brought those guys water, and continued to pass us by. And it was a revelatory moment for everybody. Me and a couple of the other guys in the running back room picked up on it right away. Like, oh, we know what's going on here. And given where we were, it wasn't super surprising. We said, okay, we know what's going on here. But then, it was a great moment. The other guys on the team seeing like, holy crap, this stuff still happens, because it was so clear what was going on. You couldn't write it off as us being the visiting team or whatever. It was super clear what it was. And it was a moment that catalyzed understanding. And actually, I'll bridge that to what I think is happening in this moment. What I saw happen with our Washington football team the other day, when we took a break from our football schedule to pause and have a conversation as an organization about this, what I saw happening was understanding across lines. Guys sharing their stories, and maybe guys, especially those who aren't Black, for the first time hearing those stories and getting an understanding of of the differential experience that might exist for folks just living day to day in society. And so we had that moment then, and it made us all close in that moment. Hopefully that's what's happening in this moment. And out of this will come unified action. Black, white, green, yellow, purple, everybody together giving voice in a unified way to make progress, to get some tangible actions.
Wow, Jason. I think I remember that episode too.
Yeah, I think we might have told you about it. Yeah,
exactly. We'll leave it there. The Pro Football Hall of Fame is home, if you didn't know or not, to the Black College Hall of Fame. And this is because the College Hall of Fame, unfortunately, didn't show the same level of respect to the other honorees. And this was led by trailblazers. And this is a two-parter. Willie Lanier, Mel Blount, Shaq Harris, and Doug Williams. Number one, what are your thoughts about joining these trailblazers to really preserve the history and the legacy of our great football players that played at the HBCUs?
Yeah, so I think at this moment, we should be elevating HBCUs everywhere we possibly can. Not just in sports, definitely in sports for their contributions, but more broadly. Like, the stats are clear about higher education for Black folks. It's tougher most places. There are barriers most places. But if you're Black and you go to an HBCU, you're 30% more likely to graduate than if you went to a non-HBCU or a PWI, predominantly white institution. They have been leading the charge, not just in sports, but for Black socioeconomic elevation for years. So any ways that we can put attention and resources on what HBCUs have done historically and are critically doing in this moment in history, I'm all here for it. So however I can be a part of that, I'm down.
And with that being said, do you see yourself teaming up with trailblazers such as Doug Williams, who is a part of the Washington football team?
I had a great, it was such an honor for me to have a sit down with Doug last week. Because if I think about who he was in our family, my dad grew up in East Texas and is a Cowboys fan. And he remembers, throwing off all Cowboys gear and forgetting all about it to pull for the Washington football team in the Super Bowl. And in his words, just watching Doug Williams go off was a moment that elevated him in a way that was transcendent. Especially as a former civil rights activist. Remember, he was talking about him and my uncle watching the game and feeling like lifted to another plane. And to be able to sit with somebody like that and talk about the future of the franchise, talk about how we re-engage alumni of this historic franchise, and honor that history in a deeper way. I'm excited. I wish I could get started on, I wish I could have got started on it already, but we have other things on our minds. But yeah, it's an honor to work alongside him, and partnering with those guys is an absolute must.
And Jason, how do you see yourself as being a mentor for other Blacks within the sports profession and in business too, Black sports professionals and business professionals to get into that next level of the NFL
Sure.
C-suites?
Sure. I mean, gosh, I feel really ill-equipped to be a mentor because I'm so fresh. But if I were to embrace it, which I should, I'd say the one thing I can do is first of all be maybe before a mentor, a role model, and that's do a good job. Do a good job in this role. Deliver on expanding franchise value, but also just sort of lead in a way that's in line with my values, and that both is anchored in how I believe a business should be run, and also doesn't compromise who I am. Like when the time comes, I can be unapologetically Black at those times as well. So I think leading in that way will help create those opportunities as a role model. I think from a mentorship standpoint, I plan to share what I'm learning in this role. I'm very open about the steps that got me here. Most that are accidental, some that were very intentional. But I think more than anything is helping other leaders and aspiring leaders understand some of the mindsets that I think helped me get here, and I'm happy to share that. And I think I'll find my footing over time on the right way to do that.
I want to spend some time with you as we get ready to close the interview, talking about your faith, because I know from being in the locker room with you personally and sharing those moments from the mega churches to the small storefront churches. But what brought you to your deep faith, Jason?
Yeah, thanks. That's a good question. I haven't answered this in a long time. I didn't grow up a person of faith. I was, I guess, 20 years old in college when we had a traumatic thing happen at Northwestern. One of my teammates who actually went to my hometown, at the end of a workout, a bunch of us passed out, actually a fault of our own. We can talk about that in detail another time. We took some supplements that were not good for us, and we knew it, but we were just being foolish. A bunch of us passed out. He never got up, died there on the field. And he was from my hometown. I was having a tough time my freshman year. And so someone like that who represented a source of stability for me really hit me hard. And so I grieved really hard, but not in that sort of good way where, there's grief that you cry and you start healing. It wasn't that kind. It was like, it felt worse and worse every time I was, crying about it. And, at that moment, a lot of the words that folks had been telling me my freshman year, especially some really dynamic and impressive women in my dorm, some of my teammates, talking to me about what, faith in God could do as a source of stability, what they had found in their practice of Christianity in particular did for them, and solidified them in these moments. Those words started to come back, and I started to explore it for myself, and eventually, converted and became a person of faith and started attending a local church and found a sense of hope and community, in the Church of Christ. But I think, irrespective of which faith it is, it has been a driving force for me and so many others to both navigate these moments that life throws at you, because life is always going to throw you some BS at some stage, to be anchored in those moments, but also to have a sense of a North Star, a vision, a sense of purpose. And I really think that along with just the serendipitous moments that you can't help but say, but for God, have led me sort of to where I am now.
Now, you sit on the board of the UTS, the Union Theology Seminary, which is the birthplace of Black theology. What appeals you to most about Black theology?
Yeah, I love Union. First of all, Union has been I didn't know that much about Union before a few years ago when I started having conversations about joining their board. But they have been just a historical stalwart at the intersection of social justice and theology, going back to the World War II Nazi era and the theologians who were refugeed out of Nazi Germany that spoke out against Hitler and spoke out against the war as, Christian theologians who otherwise were sort of in sync with the Nazi regime. They were at the foundation of that. Dr. King got a bunch of his foundational training there. And most certainly, Cornel West was on faculty there, and most certainly James Cone, sort of the father of Black liberation theology, recently passed, was faculty there until he passed, last year. And for me, what Union does beyond just Black folks is it gives a theological framework, the idea or the concept that God supports so much of the diversity that exists in our world, and that God is working through people of different types and always working to bring us to a place where we all see each other in our richness, esteem each other as individuals, and value one another as we value ourselves. And they do that across so many different dimensions. And the birth of Black theology there is just one of those examples.
And lastly, Jason, how do you reconcile faith and football?
For me, I mean, first of all, I feel like you got to be superstitious at a minimum to survive in the NFL. You got to have some sort of faith. Laces in, laces out, whatever it is, tie your shoes a certain order. Everybody's got some sort of faith, whether they want to admit it or not, in football. I think within football, for me at least, both as a player and now as an executive, faith allows me to release the uncontrollable. Because if I believe that there's a benevolent source that is guiding all the things I can't control and is working them towards my good and the good of the organization and the good of society ultimately, then I can stay focused on what I can control. It prevents me from spiraling into anxiety and worry about those things I can't. And it lets everything else play out in the lens of, this will come back around in some way. This will come back around in some way that's positive, which I just think allows you to make better decisions and remain focused. It's certainly helped for me on the field, and it's certainly helping for me in this moment.
And Jason, to follow up with that, you have coaches and general managers and the financial piece. They all have their philosophies of how this is the team I want to build. But for you, what is your philosophy of how you want to build a winning front office?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple things. I think the first is we have a clear set of standards, both for culture, for business performance, and it's very well established. I think then we pursue those standards with transparency. We let people know when we're falling short. We celebrate when we're hitting them, but we measure things. We lead with empathy. We are very focused on listening. And we have a culture of servant leadership where we're in service of the folks that are working under us, and most certainly in service to our fans and our sponsors and others. We have a culture of servant leadership. And then lastly, it's actually what I was just talking about. We know how to release the uncontrollable. We control what we can control, but we don't spiral out of control when things hit us. We just respond, we regroup, we re-entrench in our values. And I think maybe part of that is also we trust one another. That's one of the things I brought from football. I remember, being a third down back in Cleveland, and, playing against the Steelers and the Ravens at the time. They had some of the most complex blitz schemes that, the NFL has seen to date. And I remember having to really work in sync and trust the O-line. And they had to trust me to sort things and pick it up however it would work well to protect our quarterback. And I remember one time the Steelers threw a blitz at us that we weren't ready for. And me and Joe Thomas on the left side passed off in a way we'd never practiced before, but had become almost become like a symbiotic unit. We were able to pass off folks, and I ended up picking up the defensive end, and he ended up picking up the blitzing linebacker or safety or whatever it was, and we kept the quarterback safe because we trusted one another, like in an implicit way. I hope we grow to a place where as an organization, we organically trust one another, and people perform incredibly well in their jobs when they feel trusted.